All right, good evening, everyone. I'd like to call to order the 2021 Truth and Taxation meeting. It's December 13th, 2021. And I guess we'll start right out with opening comments. Connie, if you want to come up and or you're right here, I'm sorry. The comments on what we're here for, and I'd like to make sure that rather than repeat it 3 times on what the purpose was, what we're doing.
Sure.
Go ahead, Connie.
Tonight we'll be explaining the 2022 proposed tax levy and budget. We will also be providing a forum for public input. This meeting is not to discuss individual parcel information, whether that involves value, classification, or taxes payable. If you do have questions regarding your individual parcel data, we will be providing time to take your name and phone number for a future call or visit. McLeod County Assessor Sue Schultz will now present the review of 2021 valuation for taxes payable in 2022.
Good evening. My name is Sue Schultz. I am the County Assessor. Tonight we will discuss briefly about market values to explain a little bit how our office does the information, how we gather, and how we determine values. If you do have a specific question about your values after I am done, we will go to another room and we can discuss it further in there. This is about the budget, not about value. So we have to approximately every 5th year review properties. The county, my staff, any property that has a building permit issue is given years also reviewed in that year. So what we do when we go to the properties is that we gather the information. So we measure all the structures, we look at the quality of construction, we determine the age, quality, basement finish, extra features, and then we compute a value based on that information. And that information that we generate determines the cost for the building, and then we adjust our costs per value, or per the market, So then what we do is, once we determine that value, we do what's called the annual sales ratio study. And this is to determine if our values or our properties are in line to what the market is actually doing. Our sales run from October to September. So for the 2021 valuation that you receive this year for the taxes that are due next year, those sales occurred from October of 2019 through September of 2020. So at this particular point, we're actually a couple years behind on what the market is actually doing. And then we also add new construction. So new construction is actually added the following year. If you do any kind of new construction in October, or let's say October of 2019, it gets added to the tax rolls in the 2020 assessment payable 2021. So your new construction, there's always a lag in the time that you actually pay for your property taxes. When we get the sales, they get filed in our office. They come with what's called a certificate of real estate value. On there is the buyer and the seller, the sale price, and general information. What we do actually at that point is call all the sales, either the buyer or the seller, trying to determine the actual value of the real estate. Sometimes they get included in with personal property, stoves, refrigerators, lawnmowers. We try to capture that value and it gets actually subtracted out. Once we determine an actual value for the real estate, we take that value and it gets divided into our assessed value. We have to be within 90 to 105%, and that's by statute. So when we make our value changes, it's based purely on what the market is doing. So if we fall below that 90%, we're raising values, and if we're over that 105, we're reducing values. For the 2021 assessment, these are the ratios that we have for the townships. The next screen will give the cities. As you can see, our ratios in a lot of the areas were pretty good this year. There were a few areas, Hassan Valley, Hale, where we dropped down below that 90%, and we're raising values because of it. One of the things too that we have to look at is how many sales. So the state of Minnesota, if there's 6 or more sales in a taxing district by classification, we are required to raise values. If we don't, the state will come in and do it for us. If they're under that 6 sales, then we are not required to, but we still have to look at the market and see if there's any adjustments that are necessary. So we do, one of the things too that we do sales calls for is to find whether or not that sale is what we call a qualified sale. And that means that, like if it's a relative sale, if it's a contract for deed payoff, those kind of sales get thrown out. They're not part of our sales study. We do try to get all the information we can to make sure that it's a qualified sale.
So what does the percent mean?
The percent, that ratio, is that's where we're supposed to be between 90 and 105%. So those are the sales that came through, and so when the sales come through, we looked at our assessed value compared to the sale price. Those 11 sales, that median ratio was 94% for Acoma, meaning that Acoma we didn't need to make really any adjustments for because it met the state requirements. Excuse me.
So with Sumter, they're at 82, what do you do with them?
On Sumter then, because they only had 3 sales, we did adjust their values a little bit, but we didn't have to raise it above the 90. But we will look at
Take
them.
them to 90 though?
We took those sales to 90, yes.
So Hutchinson was really low.
Yes. And Hutchinson, Hassan Valley, and Sumter, one of the things that we do look at too is where the sales occurred. If we have pocketed of areas where we have a influx of sales that the ratio is really bad in that area, we'll adjust just that area. Hassan Valley, Hale, and actually Sumter are the 3 that we actually stratified. And we didn't increase the whole township, but we did look at the platted areas and increase those. That's because we're at where our sales were at.
And, excuse me, but you have to remember, it's not like we're behind, that's driven by the sales. That's what causes it to change. Any sale that happens is what causes them percentages to change.
And sometimes the market will take off in a certain area, and we can get sort of left holding in the bag. I mean, it's sometimes it's very hard to predict what the market's actually going to do.
Assessor Schultz,
Yes.
question about the Winston Township line. What's the 46.61?
Now that's under commercial. We look at our sales under each category. So residential has their own sales market, commercial, each main characters. So there was one sale. We don't usually give it much weight when there's only one sale. I don't know what sale that was. But if there's one sale, then we'll take a look at it and see. The state's very hard on, for us to get stuff thrown out. But on this kind of particular, we wouldn't put much weight into that sale because it's only one.
So is the 46.61, is that the percentage of?
Our market was 46% of the
So
sale.
if we would have had it valued at $100,000, it sold at $46,610.
Understood, thank you.
Sorry. Thank you. So then, and the next page is our cities that we made the adjustments for. And then you have your commercial, and we did have some apartment sales in the city of Hutch where our ratio was extremely low. We did hit them very hard this year. We did make some significant adjustments on those. With the 4 sales, and we do look at the a 5-year history of them. So with that, we did make some significant changes on the apartments. This next screen shows you then the actual percentage changes that we did. One of the things that to keep in mind when you see some of these changes, for example, in Collins, it looks like we went up 15% on our commercial. We did not. One of the things that will happen is that there's a change in classification from like residential to commercial. In the smaller communities, it makes it look like we're making some significant adjustments and we're not. It's just that when you get a smaller sample of certain classifications, when you make a change from one to the other, it looks like we're doing some significant changes when we're not doing that. And that's what's happening in Collins and Sumter. And then in the cities too, the next screen, there's some there too that are showing some weird adjustments. And those are just classification shifts. They're not actually value adjustments. But it gives you an overall idea of what some of the value changes that occurred throughout the county for the 2021 assessment. Overall, if you add the county together, our agricultural values have been pretty stable, so we had no increase on those. We were in the mid-90s on those. Average on the residential was 5.5%, commercial industrial 2%, and then apartments about 16%. And like I said, we did hit them pretty hard this year. So how value can impact your property taxes. The budget set your tax. The dollars that the taxing authorities need to run their business. Our value determines your share of that pie. And it can vary. Your share of it can change based on the factors that are listed there. Individual value changes. If, let's say, your township went up, 10, 15%, but we were at your property and we reviewed it and we made some adjustments, you may not see much of an increase because maybe we lowered your value or yours didn't go up quite as high as another property owner's. The classification. So like I said, farmland is sort of an example of that. We haven't raised farmland in the past couple of years. Our ratios have been in the 90s, so we haven't had to. With the value changes, increases on the commercial, industrial, the apartments, on the residential, a lot of farmland had no increase in their taxes this year or maybe even a slight decrease. You can have those class shifts depending upon what happens. New construction, if you've done new construction to your property, obviously your property taxes are going to go up a little bit more, but it also causes a shift around a little bit as well. If you get enough new construction in the county where there's more properties paying their part of that pie, then you can see your value down, or your property taxes go down. Your classification change. If you would go from residential to commercial, commercial has a higher class rate. Residential's at 1%, commercial's at 1.5%. Depending upon what happens on your property, or if it goes the other way, you could see taxes increase or decrease on your property based on that classification change. And then homestead as well. Homestead can make a difference on your property taxes as well if you lose or gain it. Farmland in particular can be a nasty shock when it goes non-homestead. Is basically doubling your property taxes. And those are just some of the factors that can affect. This is dealing with value and classification, obviously budgets and state aid, and there's a multiple other ways that what would affect your property taxes. So like they said, tonight is not talking about value. We set our values in the spring of the year. You would have gotten a valuation notice from us in March. The meetings for local board meetings are April. Those are your local taxing districts. In June, we have the county board. Once those meetings are passed, by statute, we are not allowed to change value. But we can still discuss value. We can still arrange for staff to come and review your property, or I can review take a look at and see if there's some general information. What we normally do at this point is that if anybody does have a question on their particular property, we'll go to the room over there if you want to follow me, and we can take names and telephone numbers and then maybe answer more specific questions. Yes?
Just curious, what happened with homestead credits? I imagine it's a state thing or something.
It is.
Like for residential like me, it used to be a pretty good deduction. Now I think it's virtually nothing.
The state has what's called the homestead exclusion, and it tiers out. It maxes out in value, or your greatest credit is at $76,000, and as your value goes up, that exclusion decreases. Once you reach roughly $413,000, it no longer applies to the property. It still shows as homestead, but there's no longer any exclusion on it.
And that's a state thing.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
They needed more money.
All right. Any other questions?
Questions for Sue? 'Cause I think that last slide is probably. questions for Sue. That last slide is probably the most, from what I've learned from experiences, that's the most confusing part of that, is getting your classifications right and changes in classifications. So if there's any questions.
Okay.
All right, Connie.
Thank you, Sue. So after Sue has completed the county valuation determinations, tax capacity is calculated, followed by tax calculation. So let's review some definitions. So the levy is the amount of money that the taxing authority needs to operate, and then those dollars are raised through the property taxes. Tax capacity is a parcel's taxable market value multiplied by the class rate for that property, and the class rates are mandated by the Minnesota Department of Revenue. The tax base is the total value of taxable property within the community. So as Sue referred to, the pie, the whole pie, and then it gets split up into pieces. The tax rate is the portion of the total taxable value of property needed to achieve the levy dollars, or the calculation at the top there. So that would be your piece of the pie. And then the total local tax rate is going to be the total of all the tax rates of all the taxing authorities who are authorized to levy taxes on a particular parcel of property. So that's going to be the total of all those taxing authorities listed there, the state, the county, the cities, the townships, etc. And so I'd like to just give a couple examples on this page, and I'm going to start out with just ballpark figures of McLeod County. So if you had a proposed levy of $25 million and a tax capacity of $42 million, your local tax rate is 59.5%. But say you had extreme growth in the county, and the next year you kept your levy the same because you didn't need any additional money. Your tax capacity, let's just say it's $52 million. Your tax rate would be 48.1%. It would decrease 11.4%. So it's all the variables in that top equation that get to your tax rate. And then the third example, let's just say your 25 million and your 52 million, let's increase both of those by 3%, and your tax rate would still be 48.1%. So even though a taxing authority increases their levy, you may see that your taxes for that taxing authority don't increase because it's the whole piece of the pie. And if there was enough in the tax base to absorb that growth, the rates could go down.
Can you define what TIF district is?
Tax increment financing.
What does that mean?
It's a special taxing authority that they capture the tax. So like cities do it, the county doesn't have any themselves. They capture the tax, and then the tax is used to fund whatever project it is, whether it's a housing development or redevelopment or economic development, soils. And then those dollars are still paid by the taxpayer, but those dollars go to the taxing authority to pay for the project. You'll read about TIF districts like in expansion projects, like in Glencoe or Hutchinson. You have one, I think, in Winstead. So the next screen is 2022 net tax levies by taxing authority. This chart lists the certified and proposed levy dollars of all the taxing authorities in McLeod County and the resulting percent increase or decrease in those proposed levies. You'll see that McLeod's proposed levy increase is 3%. And then I'll just pause for a second while you go ahead and look through and find your own authorities that relate to you. The next screen is McLeod County net tax levy by fund. This chart provides a 3-year comparison of McLeod County's tax levy by fund. The tallest fund in the orange color is our revenue fund, which includes expenses for employee health care, payroll, technology, and capital repairs. And then just another note, the Minnesota Department of Revenue's 2022 preliminary property tax levies report indicated that the Minnesota County average levy increase was 3.7%. McLeod does fall below that average by 0.7%. Property tax dollars by taxing authority. This chart shows the distribution of the tax dollars that I do after collection. The county does have 39% of the property tax dollars. So what does the county do for you? McLeod County delivers a wide range of services to a growing and changing population. These are services that the public has come to rely on. We are here for you to maintain roads, maintain property records, protect the health of the community, protect the environment, provide justice, and provide protection. The next few slides will show how changes in levies, classification, or value impact your tax statement. So these go a little bit deeper into the explanation that Sue was giving before. This first one is a parcel in the city of Silver Lake. The 2021 taxable market values and 2022, those numbers are consistent. The classifications are consistent. And with the levy increase, the total tax rate increased about 2.4% from 2021 to 2022, resulting in a 1.4 total tax increase. Changes in classification impact tax statements. This happens to be a parcel in the city of Hutchinson. 2021 and 2022 taxable market values are consistent. 2021 and 2022 classifications differ. They were residential, non-homestead commercial, and they went to residential, non-homestead, so removal of the commercial, resulting in a 13.6% total tax decrease. And the last example here, this is another parcel in the city of Hutchinson. The 2021 and 2022 classifications are consistent. So note the local tax rate decreased about 5.1% from 21 to 2022, and the 2022 taxable market value increased by $368,700, which resulted in a 42.9% total tax increase. Taxable market value, net tax capacity, tax increment, and local tax rate. This chart provides a 3-year comparison. McLeod County's local tax rate had decreased from 2020 to 2021 by 1.3%, and then again from 21 to proposed 2022 by 1.2%. McLeod County's 10-year average local tax rate is 57.027%, due to multiple years of a 0% levy increase. The proposed 2022 levy brings the local tax rate to approximately 1.3% of the 10-year average. (2022) proposed levies per capita comparison. This chart shows the 2022 proposed levies per person, so essentially what each person in the county would pay towards the levy. McLeod County ranks 33 out of the 87 Minnesota counties for 2022. In 2021, McLeod County ranked 38, so our movement is in the right direction. The orange bars represent the neighboring counties. You can note the higher per person amounts for counties with higher agricultural parcel counts. That would be Renville and Sibley. And note the lower per person amounts for heavily populated counties with more commercial industrial properties, Carver and Wright. Then McLeod County is in the middle with 705 for each person. And then the taupe colored bars represent similarly populated counties. The average of those similarly populated is 721. So with McLeod at 705, we do fall $16 less than the average of the similarly populated. Next, I will turn the presentation to McLeod County Finance Director Colleen Robeck, who will review the McLeod County budget and levy information.
Thank you. This is an overview of the county's annual budget process. So we begin budget planning with the department levels in June, and we continue through July. Then the county's budget committee meets throughout the year. In August, they meet to review the departmental budgets and capital requests. The board sets the preliminary levy, or we set it on September 20th, 2021. The board will set the final levy in December of this year, and the final levy can be decreased but not increased from the preliminary levy amount. On this slide, you'll see the funds that impact the levy. The general fund, road and bridge, social services, and debt service. On this slide, you will see these funds do not impact the levy. At the bottom of the graphic, you'll note the net difference between the 2021 adopted budget and the 2022 proposed budget. Here is a graphic that shows the revenues by fund. The largest income generators are the revenue fund at 37.5%, the road and bridge fund at 31.5%, and human services fund at 22.5%. Here's a similar graphic that alternately shows where the expenditures for in the county. The largest expense categories are road and bridge, social services, general government, and public safety. Here and continued on the next slide are the breakdowns of capital requests by department that have been approved by the board when the 2022 preliminary budget was set. The departments shown on this first slide are the departments that make up the general fund. Continued on this slide are the remaining departments outside of the general fund and their 2022 capital requests. As outlined in previous slides, planning discussion starts in July and August for these requests each year. They then go through a budget committee review process in August. The board approves these capital requests at their board meetings in September when they set the annual preliminary budget, and then finalize the budget in December. This graphic shows the debt obligations of McLeod County. It is broken down into four main categories, including debt levy. That's the top one that's highlighted in pink. That is the one that impacts the property taxes. Then underneath that, we have non-levy bonds, which do not impact property taxes. Ditch bonds and loans, which are special assessments. And lastly, septic loans, which are also special assessments. This is a 10-year gross tax levy comparison. The 10-year average is a 3.5% increase. Note the 3 years of 0% change in the tax levy from 2013 through 15. This led to a higher percentage increase in the following years in order to make up for those years of no growth in the county tax levy. Here are some of the identifiable factors that contribute to increases in the tax levy, shown under the cost drivers category, as well as factors that help alleviate these increases, shown in the cost relievers category. Some of the cost drivers in the county include mandated services, service demand, wage and benefits, cost of living increases, budgeted capital expenses and technology maintenance. And some of the cost relievers of the county included the CARES Act funding for the COVID-19 pandemic, personnel review, long-term planning, and the local option sales tax revenue, also known as LOST. Here's an update on the McLeod County Government Center renovation project cost to date. The project continues to come in significantly under budget. The bonds were issued at over $14 million, and we have spent less than $11 million to date. Here are the 3 examples of accredited areas to the county, which reaffirm strong fiscal management. McLeod County is consistently well below its allowable debt capacity. We are currently 75% below our debt capacity.
Thank you, Colleen. At this time, we are extending time for public questions and comments.
Questions?
Mr. Chair,
Go ahead.
I just would add, if at this point, if you have any questions or comments, if you'd come to the podium and use the microphone so everybody can hear you, but that's all.
There's no bad questions. Mr. Amos, state your name, please.
Darius Remus, Glencoe. Just some comments. Got my proposed tax increases or proposed taxes statement in the mail. The county tax showed a 10.9% increase for me. Now everything you're showing like 3% or whatever, so somehow mine's coming out at 10.9%. I'm sure you know that the Social Security increase, the cost of living adjustment for Social Security recipients is 5.9. And yet my increase is projected at 10.9. Increases in taxes by double the rate of inflation, to me, is an insult to the McLeod County residents. This caused me to start chasing some data. Looked at some data. The average household income in McLeod County, 2019 data, average household income in McLeod County supposedly was $61,000 or $62,121. Okay, that's 2019 data. So let's round it up to $65,000. Okay. Net income after federal taxes, state taxes, 7.65% for FICA deductions, assuming a joint return for husband and wife both working, using a standard deduction, after income, the income be $53,500. That's what they have after tax income. Now that's before health insurance, out-of-pocket medical, anything like that. So your proposed county tax amount, based on my tax rate, would be 2% of after-tax income. But then the city of Glencoe and Buffalo Water Creek Watershed, they want more than that. So by the time the county is done and the city is done, that's over 4% of after-tax income. Right? And that's before health insurance, medical expense, groceries, utilities, gas for the car, clothing, et cetera, et cetera. Now, if you consider the residents on Social Security, and I think the data shows that McLeod County has over 20% of the population is senior population. The average benefit being $1,562 a month, assuming a couple, husband and wife, both receiving the average benefit, it'd be $37,488. So that same dollar amount would consume 7% of their after-tax income. I think that's outrageous. Now, one of the slides showed, budgets set the tax. You cannot go on. Do you realize if people are getting 4% increases and their taxes are going up, 10%, those lines cross, everything collapses. So, understand how you're calculating all of it, but it's like your slide says, budgets set the tax. You need to do something with the budgets. bring these tax increases down to the cost of living adjustment or less. That's all I have.
Thank you. Any comments?
I guess I would just like to comment that the city of Glencoe did have a almost 8% increase. McLeod County's budget or levy was 3%. And I will take your name and number and we can call you. I don't know if part of your increase was due to an increase in value, but we did run through just some little examples of that. So, you know, that could be part of the determining factors
Of
also.
course, part of it. You know, and I'm not sure, 3%, are you averaging everything, the agricultural property, the commercial property, and the residential property? Because the people I've talked to, nobody I've talked to has had just a 3% projected increase. Everybody's had much, much higher than 3%
Well,
on residential.
yeah, I live in Coma Township. Mine went down 4.1%.
Well, I guess I didn't ask you what yours changed.
No, I think it's all over, Darius. I appreciate your, Mr. Amos, I appreciate the information, and I don't doubt it for a minute, but,
Well, that's real data. That's real data that I've looked up. And yes, you know, the property value, I'm sure, well, I know it went up. But realize you cannot spend your appreciated property value. Now, when I die, my kids will. But I cannot use that appreciated property value to buy groceries, to put gas in my car. I can't use that appreciated property value for a doggone thing. Right? None of you can. So this level of increase has got to stop. And your slide says budgets set the tax. You got to do something with the budget.
any more comments? Anyone? Go ahead.
Jennifer Moore, Hutchinson. Just a question on this slide about the revenue. If you guys could just give me an example of like what those pieces of the pie, what that means about, yep, that one. And then I always like to hear some of the success stories of trying to save money. So if you guys could share any stories about, what you're doing to cut costs.
Well, one thing at a time, so, I mean, if you want, who wants to take this clean, or the 20, was there a specific question?
Just because it's
So what-
abstract for me.
Oh, so what makes up the revenues?
Just like an example of what would be,
Sure. So like in road and bridge, you're going to have federal funding for road projects. Local option sales tax is a big revenue within that fund. The general fund, we get county program aid and different aids like aquatic aid, different types of funding from the state and federal governments. And also there's fees within most things. You have a permit fee, you have different fees and that sort of thing.
human services, like what kind of?
Most of that revenue is from the state and the federal government.
An example is that if we spend $600,000 in collecting child support, the feds reimburse us a minimum of $400,000. If we spend $50,000 in doing fraud in investigation, we're going to get reimbursed about half of that, with a quarter coming from the feds and a quarter from the state each.
I will say, in my department where we deal with the elections and also drainage ditches, we really watch the grant process. Like today, I was at the board for the Vega 3 grant and also the HAVA 21 grant. And we go through this Ag BMP loans for 0% loans to the county. We do watch all of the FEMA dollars. We've gotten large sums from FEMA for our drainage systems. So that all saves money to the taxpayer.
And as far as examples, I know that that's going to be hard to give you an example that you're going to want to hear. I mean, you look for efficiencies, because it takes qualified staff to get the results you want to do, or we want as a county to reap some of them benefits of these grants. And we've put some people in place. I'm pretty proud of our whole staff to accomplish that. I mean, in this building, for me personally, is part of that success story. Obviously, it's going to take another year or two to show you the data that the efficiencies are there, because we had buildings and property everywhere. We've got all our property now either sold or one piece yet tentatively sold. That money comes back on the tax rolls. I mean, and I'm talking just the bigger ones. I know our staff could give better examples, and obviously it costs money to keep staff right now. You can go anywhere, private or public, and it's hard to hold staff. And I mean, you have to do your wage increases. I'm like everybody else here. I'm a commissioner, but I face the same challenges of fixed income and Social Security and health care and the whole 9 yards. So, I mean, I'm trying to be as politically correct as I can, but I mean, I have them same challenges, but I'm proud of what we're doing, and I'm hoping a year from now that we can show you the actual statistics of how this changes, and them classifications are. I mean, I had several calls this week. People are structuring; they're doing their due diligence, and whether it's trust for farmland, I've got calls because a lot of farmland went down, and they're happy with that. But they pulled building sites off as they reclassified, and they no longer they changed qualifications, and their taxes doubled. So, I mean, you throw that all in the mix, so I really respect all the comments, but it's tough to give that specific answer you'd like. Go ahead.
Mr. Chair, and I'd add, we've combined some departments. Public health and social services used to be separate, two different directors. That's went into one, environmental services, planning and zoning, things like that. I would echo Commissioner Kruger regarding the buildings. It's going to be a little tough to see right now, but we've now sold those properties, and one is pending, and hopefully that we realize some tax benefit to that. And then also, and I say this every year, and we really all year long take a look at the staff and if it's in the right place or if it's the right person, not the right person, the right position. So I'm proud of that. Sometimes that takes, you go from 2 to 1 person, but you pay the one a little bit more. I mean, I'm being honest. Sometimes we're able to take that job rating and bring it down, and do that. Today at the board meeting, we increased hours to a position, but we eliminated another position by doing that. We didn't need 2.5. We didn't need 1.5. We needed 1. So we look at that all the time, and they're gonna take one for the team, the staff, but they're so sick of me or us beating on them to look at that all year long, and we do it consistently and constantly. And when we get it wrong, we own it, and we try to fix that. That's what it is. So, in my humble opinion, that's a big deal for us, because you saw the slide. Staffing is expensive. Commissioner Kruger is right. Staffing is hard to get. People are here, and yet the citizens, the constituents, still are demanding a service to not falter or be less. So it's probably more of a struggle than a success story, but it's something that we need to look at.
Thank you, Commissioner. Anyone else? And I got one more comment, because in these slides, solid waste was in there, and our recycling programs and different things. We're still the only county out of 87 that doesn't charge a fee for collecting. We're the only one. I just went through it again at AMC, and people really scratched their heads, so I'm proud of that as well. You know, we're struggling with it, but that's part of it. And sometimes you just got to deal the cards you dealt. And that's, I mean, I can't change things, although I agree with some of the comments, but that's all I have. Any more questions? Go ahead, Ron.
Thank you, Commissioners. Ron Szymanski, McLeod County, Hale Township. A year ago, I would have been on the other side of that table. But Commissioner Kruger answered most of my question as, you know, the efficiencies being gained with the new government center and so forth. And I know it's kind of hard to track the statistics, you know, this close. You're not even a full year into this facility yet. And so I do congratulate you on, you know, kind of holding the line. I was pleased when I saw the preliminary budget number set. But, you know, I'm more concerned about what this session is going to look like a year from now, with inflation kind of rearing its head, and, you know, wages are going to get driven up. And so I just ask you to be mindful of that and, you know, stay the course on, you know, making your staff as efficient as possible, and, you know, just having your eye on the whole system. A couple of questions. I noticed in the budget you had an allocation for parks, and I'm glad to see that you're investing some additional funds in parks. And I've always been an advocate that the county park should be a greater asset that we utilize countywide. And the one question I probably didn't see any statistic on was contribution to Trailblazer. Where are we with Trailblazer as far as county levy dollars supporting the transit system? I know years ago there was a big number, and then we whittled it down pretty well. But
Yeah, the ridership's going to be, because, you know, as you can imagine, that's down. I should let Doug take this, but, you know, that.
I don't have the specific number right now, but the state's putting in so much money that our cost shares to the counties are not going to change very much they're not changing from last year. Right. And so there's some, I mean, we're having our struggles there as well. Sure. I mean, with wages, but again, the state's putting in so much, we call it COVID money, call it whatever, you know, ARPS funding, but.
Are we concerned about what happens when the COVID funding stops coming?
That's the thing you got to watch. That's exactly right. That's exactly what you have to watch.
That's about staying the course.
Yep.
Ron, I can give you that number.
Okay.
We have $174,930 budgeted for the Trailblazer for 2022.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Ron.
Colleen, as long as you've got that number, what was 2021? That's what I thought. I was sure it didn't change. And again, there's so many things there that are beyond your control, because the people that come to us, whether they're, you know, they're jobs, good workers, but the gross national product, I believe that's 6.9%. It just went up. It was 6 point something, and I think it's 6.8 or 6.9. So what do you do? I mean, there's a nice place you'd like to cut, but we're lucky we got dedicated people that we do have. So, any more questions?
Mr. Chair,
Go ahead.
unless there's another question, I would ask you to entertain a motion to adjourn.
Oh, can we just do? So, I'm sorry, one more thing. So what is next? The final 2022 McLeod County budget and levy will be considered at the December 21st, 2021 county board meeting. And then just as a reminder, like Colleen said, final levies can be set lower, but not higher than preliminary levies. And we want to thank you for your attendance. If you do have questions following the presentation, please contact me with my contact number on the screen.
And real quickly, before I take that motion, is there anybody, I mean, this is your last chance to ask questions. I know we don't always like to hear them, but I'll take constructive criticism as good as anybody else. But I can assure you that you're looking at a board that does the best they can, trying to hold our, you know, and not that we don't make some mistakes or some hiccups, but we did the best we can to try to be efficient and still provide the services that, this last week was real easy to provide services. Nobody argued about our help plowing the roads, but sometimes when they're mowing the weeds in the summertime, they don't like it, but it's the same people trying to do their same job, so.
So I guess like just one thing under the cost drivers, Jennifer Moore, with the election, is there going to be any additional mandated costs with?
Of course, we never know that, but like I said, we are getting new equipment. We are hoping that's funded by grants, and if not, that will be passed on to the jurisdictions. Like this past year, a mandated expense was the PNP election in March. That was not something that counties did, and all of a sudden, we had to take on a brand-new election. We just had to fit it in between our schedules. All of our work starts in November. It's right through my tax calculation. That's just the way it is. We just have to do it. So that's staff time, that's just things that happen, mandates.
Okay.
Thank you.
You might want to look at, we just had at our regular meeting, if you get a chance, go rather and get through it, look at our minutes from today's meeting. She did have some equipment and stuff in there that's not really levy dollars, but she's proposing some other income to do that. So, but I'd encourage people to try and follow us on our minutes as well.
Ready?
Huh?
Not Dominion equipment, is it?
Well, it's somewhat mandated. I mean, you got so much time. I'm not saying I'm in agreement of some of the equipment we need, but once it gets so old, you either fall behind, or like the examples that Colleen showed you, Robeck. I mean, when you try to keep the levies low, and then you knock yourself out of a budget, and you try to come back. And the same in these cases, that we have machines that are real close to being mandated to get changed, and I think they're doing their due diligence. Okay.
Mr. Chair, move to adjourn.
Motion made by Commissioner Nagel to adjourn. Is there a second? Seconded by Commissioner Luthens. Any discussion? Hearing none, we'll proceed to vote. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. We're adjourned.
Thank you for coming.